He came in every Thursday. Same table, same order, same quiet voice asking for black coffee and a slice of toast. His accent was heavy, his English slow, careful, like every word had to be weighed before it could be spoken. Some nodded politely. Most ignored him. But one morning, a group of young men sitting 2 tables over started whispering just loud enough to be heard. They laughed at how he said, "Thank you," mocked the way he looked. One of them even joked, "Bet he's never worked a day in his life here." He didn't respond. He just sipped his coffee, folded his napkin, and slowly opened the inside of his coat. What he pulled out didn't make a sound, but it silenced the entire cafe. 3 medals, 1 photo, and a truth no one had asked to hear. But everyone needed to. This is Stories Unfolded. And today, we're telling the story of a man they didn't understand, until he showed them who he truly was. His name was Armand Darian, though most people in town didn't know that. At the cafe, he was simply called the old guy in the coat. He didn't correct them, he didn't offer his name, he just came in every Thursday at 7 a.m., sat at the corner table near the window, and ordered the same thing: black coffee, no cream, 1 slice of toast, lightly buttered. He spoke with a thick accent, the kind that made people lean in when he spoke, not out of interest, but out of effort. His English wasn't broken. It was just cautious. Words came to him slowly, like they had a long road to travel before they reached his mouth. He never complained, never sent food back, never asked for refills, and he always wore the same long brown coat, even in summer. It looked heavy, stitched from a different time, maybe even a different country. The collar was frayed, the buttons mismatched, but he wore it like it meant something. Because it did. Armand had come to America nearly 40 years ago, a political refugee from a country whose name most Americans couldn't pronounce, let alone place on a map. He had seen war before he turned 20, had held his best friend's hand as he bled out in a snow-covered ditch. And when he was given the chance to help the U.S. military as a combat interpreter during the early 2000s, he didn't hesitate. He served in Iraq with the 10th Mountain Division, not as a soldier by rank, but as a man who walked through firefights without armor, translating orders in real time while bullets cracked overhead. He earned no fame, signed no book deals. He just went home with scars he didn't speak of, and stories no one ever asked to hear. His son, Lev, enlisted after him. Born in America. Joined the Army straight out of high school. He deployed twice. On his 3rd tour, he didn't come back. Armand received the folded flag alone. His wife had died the year before from cancer. His only son, gone. Since then, he had lived quietly, modestly, a 2nd-floor apartment above an old hardware store. No car, no computer, just books, silence, and a picture frame he kept on his kitchen counter next to the sugar jar. No one in town knew any of that. To them, he was a man with a strange accent, who wore the same coat and ate the same meal. He didn't try to change their minds, didn't try to explain who he was. Because over the years, he'd learned something that people who carry pain often do. Some stories protect themselves by staying quiet, until someone finally decides to listen. And on that Thursday morning, someone didn't. The cafe was halfway full when Armand walked in. It was just after 7. A light drizzle streaked the windows, and the scent of coffee mixed with the hiss of bacon on the griddle. He took his usual seat without a word, nodded at the waitress, and placed his simple order with the same slow cadence he always used. "Black coffee. 1 toast, please." She smiled kindly and wrote it down. A few minutes later, the door opened again, this time louder. A group of 3 young men walked in, mid-20s, local. The type who spoke confidently, laughed easily, and thought volume was the same as presence. They sat in the booth directly across from Armand's table. At first, it was harmless, laughing about sports, complaining about gas prices, but then the tone shifted. One of them noticed Armand quietly stirring his coffee and said under his breath, just loud enough to be heard, "You'd think after 40 years they'd learn to say toast like an American." The others snorted. One mimicked Armand's voice. Another exaggerated a foreign accent. "I want Kofi and to oast." They laughed. Armand didn't flinch. He didn't look up. He simply sipped his coffee, folded his hands in his lap, and listened. The waitress froze. She'd heard it. Everyone nearby had. But no one said anything. Because when the offense is quiet, people feel less responsibility to stop it. Armand stirred the last bit of sugar into his coffee, took a bite of his toast, and slowly reached into his coat. He didn't rush. Armand moved slowly, deliberately, like each motion meant something. His hand slipped beneath the inside flap of his coat, the lining worn thin from years of repetition. The laughter at the next booth had faded now, not because they'd been silenced, but because something about his stillness suddenly made them uncomfortable. Out from the coat came a velvet case, square and modest, the edges dulled by time. He set it on the table beside his coffee. Not like he was proving something, but like he was remembering. Then, without a word, he flipped the lid open. 3 medals. The metal caught the dim light of the cafe, but it wasn't the shine that drew attention. It was the silence. The bronze star sat on the left, tucked into its molded slot with a service ribbon above it. The combat infantry badge, earned only under direct fire, rested neatly next to it. And at the center, slightly larger, cast in silver and red enamel, the Medal of Valor from a country most people in the room couldn't name. Beside them, folded gently like a keepsake, was a photo. Black and white. Edges curled from age. A young man stood in military fatigues, rifle slung over his back, smile soft but proud. His eyes looked just like Armand's. No one said a word. Even the fry cook in the back had stopped mid-order. The waitress stood behind the counter, holding a fresh plate she forgot to deliver. Armand didn't look around, didn't raise his voice, didn't ask for attention. He simply picked up the photo and spoke, not to the room, but as if telling a story for the first time in a long time. "That is my son. His name was Lev. He was born here. He died in Afghanistan. 3rd tour. Lost to an IED outside Kandahar." He gently placed the photo back. Then a quiet breath, the kind you let out after holding too much in for too long. "I was interpreter. Iraq. 10 years. With American soldiers. I carried no gun. I saw too much. But I stayed. Because I believed in something bigger." He didn't make eye contact with the young men. He didn't need to. One of them shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at his untouched coffee. The one who had mimicked Armand's accent had gone pale. No one laughed now. The oldest of the 3, the only one who hadn't joined in, finally cleared his throat. "Sir, we're sorry. We didn't know." Armand turned toward them, not sharply, just calmly. "You did not ask. That is the problem. No." It wasn't anger. It was disappointment, the quiet kind, the kind that lingers. He gently closed the velvet case, tucked it back inside his coat, lifted his cup and took one last sip, now lukewarm. He stood up slowly, left a few bills on the table, enough to cover his coffee and toast, as always, and made his way toward the door. As he reached the exit, the waitress, her voice shaking, called out softly, "Mr. Darien?" He paused. "Would you come back next week?" He nodded once. "If there is coffee, I will come." And then he was gone. The bell above the door gave a soft chime as it swung shut behind him. The room stayed silent for a long time, because that morning a coat didn't just reveal medals. It revealed what people had chosen not to see. The next Thursday, the door of Maple and Vine Cafe opened at 6:58 a.m. Armand walked in just like before. Same coat, same pace, same gentle nod to the waitress. But something was different. The corner booth had been cleaned more carefully than usual. The silverware was already placed on the table, and next to the coffee cup sat a small folded card. He picked it up quietly. On the front, hand-lettered in ink, "Reserved for Mr. Darien, veteran, father, friend." Inside the card, a simple note. "Some things are too important to be left unsaid. Thank you for your service. Your seat will always be here." Signed, in shaky pen, by the cafe owner himself, who hadn't come in for morning shifts in years. That morning, no one whispered. No one mocked his accent. No one pretended not to see him. A man at the counter, former Coast Guard, as it turned out, stood as Armand passed and nodded. A mother dining with her 2 young boys told them softly, "That man's a hero. You listen to people like that." Even the young men from the week before returned. They didn't sit near him. They didn't say much. But on their table sat a folded note and a small American flag napkin, neatly creased. After his meal, Armand paused by their table. One of them stood to shake his hand. He accepted it. No lecture, no lingering speech, just eye contact, firm, respectful, and a quiet. "Next time, ask before you judge." He returned every Thursday after that, not always to read, not always to speak, sometimes just to sit. But over time, others started joining him. Veterans who'd been quiet for years, widows who'd lost husbands to war, young people who finally wanted to listen instead of speak. The corner booth wasn't just a table anymore. It had become something more. A space where silence meant respect, where accents didn't equal ignorance, and where a man who carried his grief inside his coat was finally seen for what he was: a father, a soldier, a survivor. We're taught to listen for loud voices, but sometimes the ones worth hearing speak the softest. In second languages, in trembling hands, in velvet boxes they never plan to open. Some carry honor quietly. Some carry grief privately. But the ones who carry both deserve to be remembered, even if they never ask to be. This was Stories Unfolded. Because behind every accent, there's a history. And behind every coat, there just might be a hero.